Pit stop is vital to every race team's success. Pull off the track, let your team go to work. Change all 4 tires, fill the fuel cell, and make needed adjustments, all in 8 seconds or less.
Hey. Happy Wednesday before race weekend. Pits are open, brought to you by Speed Sport. Redline Ace, Speed Sport, your one-stop shop for all racing news. And it really is all racing news. And then Redline Ace, one of the best motorsports graphic companies in the country, housed right in Speedway, Indiana, right in the heart of the beast, and does a lot of work for a lot of folks. And we're so grateful to have them on board. Of course, our all-star producer-engineer, Alex Smith. Hello, Mr. Smith.
How's it going?
Good.
I just had to check my phone, make sure it was on Do Not Disturb.
no pinstripes today. No suit today?
No.
This is about as casual dressed as I've seen you in a long time.
Maybe Monday when I wasn't feeling the best.
Yeah.
I had some
Well,
some joggers
let the
on.
folks see what you're.
Yeah.
What you're.
Oh, definitely for the show. This is definitely the most casual I've been dressed for the show.
I would say so. Gosh, wow.
It's warm today.
It is warm today. I know where you're at, but we're in Connecticut and it's warm. Hey, big race this weekend, Worldwide Technology Raceway at Gateway. It's amazing. I'm still stunned that they race out. That's a small oval track. Like it's like a 1.25 mile oval, and it's kind of an egg-shaped. I don't know what you would call it technically, but like the one first turn, second turn radius way smaller and way narrower than third and fourth turn, and then 2 long straightaways. And they get up pretty quick. They go around, but I mean the lap times are like 34 seconds is a lap or something. Crazy fast lap times. Anyway, so that's happening on Father's Day, and I give a great shout out to Fox Sports because they changed the start time. They changed the start time to 8 o'clock. So I think we're going to get really, really good ratings. We had the race in Detroit 2 weeks ago, and that had over 1 million. It was up by 45% versus NBC just a year ago. So very good job Fox is doing. I can't say enough about them. Very good, very outstanding. We're got 2 guests today. Can't wait. We have returning the IndyCar reporter for the Indy Star newspaper. Nathan Brown will be our guest. And then another event that's taking place at Worldwide Technology Raceway will be the arrival of the vintage Indy cars. These are some of the most pristinely restored cars in the country, all running in top shape. They'll actually be turning laps Saturday morning at the track and then again on Sunday. And it's something to see. If you grew up like when I fell in love with IndyCar racing in the late 60s, early 70s, some of those cars will be there. And and they're beautiful. They're breathtakingly beautiful cars. And so Mike Lashman, the president of Vintage Indy, will be with us at the 4:30 in the program. So, man, it's crazy. I'm looking at the standings here, IndyCar standings. By the way, if you're on any platform watching us, thank you. Please like, comment, share. Do it right now. Like, comment, share. We don't really care if you comment. Well, we do, but the liking and the sharing is the biggest thing. And we're going the wrong way on the YouTube side. So if you're on YouTube, and we know that you are, and you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe. But we created a new YouTube channel because, well, we just had to. And the new YouTube channel is the Pits Are Open podcast. You can tell it's the new one because it's got the green light, not this logo, but it's got the green light logo because the Pits are open.
Do that one.
And and the old one has what you've seen here on the show, which we're going to be updating to the new logo. Anyway, but we still have a lot of folks on the old YouTube channel, and we're glad if you're watching there today. Thank you. If you're watching as a recorded piece, thank you for watching us on the Pits Are Open on the old YouTube channel, which has the old Pits Are Open red and black kind of color logo. But we want you to go to the Pits Are Open podcast channel on YouTube, which has the green light logo representing the Pits Are Open. And again, whatever platform you're on, thank you. And if you're not listening on Spotify, thank you so much. please follow us on Spotify. Download the show. We really appreciate it very much. We're making some great progress. Of course, everybody on Facebook, we love you guys watch us on Facebook, whether you're on Maserati Autosport page, our team page, or Spirited Speedway, our children's book page. We're glad to have you on. However you're watching or listening, it means a lot to us. It really does. Thank you. But you could help us tremendously if you'll go onto the new YouTube page. The handle is The Pits Are Open Podcast. You'll know if it's the right one because you'll see a beautiful green light indicating that the pits are open. How did that happen? I bet you're curious, Alex. Why is it pits are open? Well, back in the day, we're waiting for Nathan Brown. Back in the day, pits are always open. You go whenever you want. Didn't matter. You come in whenever you want. In fact, back in the day, there was no real speed limit on the pits. But after 1973, when horrible, the worst year ever. Well, I don't know, maybe 64 is pretty bad too. But 1973, huge accident coming out of the fourth corner. Swede Savage STP Eagle number 40 hit the retaining wall. Car exploded in flames. Savage later died a few weeks later from injuries sustained in that crash. But it was chaos in the pits as people were going the opposite direction of flow of the pits to get to corner number 4 where Savage crashed. And a crew member, Armando Turan, was hit and killed by a safety truck going the wrong direction. That was the beginning of, we need to do something about this pit situation. And so it was in the early 90s when they finally decided to rectify the situation. So what happens now is if there's a yellow flag, they close the pits immediately on a yellow flag. And I think Formula One does this too now, if I'm not mistaken. Now, aren't there times when Formula One pits are closed?
It'd have to be an extreme situation.
Okay.
But
so I just heard a click. So that's okay. So if the yellow comes out, they close the pits. They wait until the cars come around behind the pace car, not the safety car, Will Buxton. It's not a safety car. Safety car is Formula One. You're in America, United States of America, Will, and it's a pace car. When the pace car's out and there's some semblance of order that the cars are following, then they will open the pits and you may go in. So for us, the pits are always open, even though they're not at the track. And we're glad for that. I like Will Buxton. I'm only giving you a hard time, but stop calling a safety car. Gosh, be American, will you? Okay. Joining us now, the reporter for IndyCar, all things IndyCar, for the Indy Star, and that would be the one and only Nathan Brown. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Answer this question for me, and I should know this, but I'm just not as bright as I should be sometimes. Who owns Indy Star?
So it's a Gannett-owned
Gannett,
newspaper.
okay.
Yeah.
Gannett, all right. I was wondering if Hearst Media owned it, but no, it's Gannett. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you?
I'm doing well. I've had a couple days off here to catch my breath at the end of last week and the start of this one, but gearing up for. Someone told me, and I'm sure I knew this in the back of my head, but I hadn't thought about it this way. I think it's got 7 races in 7 weekends up here on tap here, starting off with Worldwide Technology Raceway this weekend. So been a crazy 5 weeks in May and the first weekend of June, and gearing up for another long, busy stretchers too.
Yeah, I mean, you got Road America, you got Milwaukee, and this. I mean, just towered 1, 2, 3. It seems, I think, and then it's a busy time. How are you used to celebrating Father's Day for yourself yet?
It's been an interesting new thing for me, as you know, a dad of a 3-year-old and then a 9-month-old as of tomorrow. So little, admittedly, selfishly, a little bummed to be away from the family on Sunday. I can't remember how that's always. I don't feel like it's fallen that way actually all that often over the last couple of years.
No, it hasn't.
So wish I was able to be home with family on Sunday, but we've also got I think a really exciting race on tap that will also be shown in prime time on Fox, which is really exciting for the sport.
Well, and I think it was Fox that prompted that time change move, which you got us. I don't know. What do you think about this? I think Fox is doing a great job.
I think they are. It's definitely a different feel They're trying some new things. There's still some kinks on the technology side that are being worked out that I don't think are necessarily wholly on Fox or even wholly on the series. But all in all, I think this little bit of a revamped booth with Will Buxton now and there gives things a little bit of a fresh feel. And I mean, you can see just from say watching the warm-up broadcasts on race weekends that they're trying some new things. They're taking advantage oftentimes to interview some folks in and around the sport with some of those things, do a little bit more storytelling. The race broadcasts themselves feel a little bit different. I think they had a little bit of a tough start the first couple race weekends, but I feel like they've kind of come into their own a little bit. You've got a director in the production truck that had never done any work around racing, let alone IndyCar, starting off this year. So I think he's made some big leaps. The production side has gotten better, and I mean, really particularly the pre-race show for the Indy 500, which I didn't get to watch live because I was down on the grid, but rewatched a couple days after, and that was I think by far the best product that they've put together so far this year.
Well, same thing. I mean, I wasn't going to miss the 500, so I was enjoying being there. But when first chance I got when I got home, I watched the replay, and what was amazing to me watching the replay, and I was I have to admit, I'm a little bit of a grouch when it comes to tradition being broken, and so I wasn't exactly excited, I have to admit, about Michael Strahan driving the pace car. I'm like, these guys no automotive experience at all. I mean, I could be driving a pace car for that matter. Will who? But I have to say, I think his personality melted well into the whole overall broadcast, and I think it was good. And I repent of being upset that Michael Strahan was the driver. But think about. I was just telling Alex before we went on the air. You look at the standings. Who could have imagined that this early into the year, hasn't happened in 2 decades that a driver's had this big of a point lead on second place, Pato O'Ward. I mean, I know Detroit was not a good event for Alex, but gosh, still, he's 100 points ahead of everybody, and I don't see him slowing down. I mean, Oval, we'll see what he does this weekend. That's not his specialty per se, but. Are you as surprised as it seems others are that he's so far ahead?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, part of what we've seen from Alex pull over these last couple of years is that, you go back to 2 years ago, in 2023, immediately, I guess it wasn't necessarily immediately following the 500. He started with his GMR Grand Prix win to kick off the month of May, and he went on a stretch where he won, I think, 4 races and 5 starts. He won Detroit. He won Road America, Mid-Ohio, along with the IMS road course race. And so we've seen him go on these spurts. We've also seen these, this incredible run of consistency from him before too. I think in that 2023 season, if I remember right, he didn't have a finish worse than 8th. He had this crazy run of top 10 finishes that either reached 20 or got really, really close to it. We've seen from this team, they make so few mistakes that honestly, for him to have an off weekend from a result standpoint in the race, you almost have to have something like what happened when David Malukas just got a little bit too close to him and tapped him into the wall on that restart late in that race in Detroit. We've seen Alex make a mistake. I think it was last year in race 1 at Iowa where he spun out on his own. They had the electrical issue at Milwaukee last year. The combination of those two things put his championship pursuit, a little bit closer to those folks following him. But I mean, really, it's going to take something really weird for them to commit some sort of a mistake that has him finishing certainly outside the top 10 and really most of the times even out of the top 5. I mean, Alex was on pace to not have a spectacular finish. I think he was 7th at the time of that incident at Detroit, but he was probably going to pass a couple of those drivers that had made that really great strategy call and had pitted right before that caution came out. And so you got to think he's probably going to still finish in the top 5 in what feels like was going to be an off weekend for him.
Yeah. I just, I don't know if anybody can slow him down. I think I've been reading some other folks, and people are surprised about Scott Dixon. Not a pole or a win yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we're used to Dixon winning poles and winning. You know, I mean, it's just what he does. But I mean, how can you? I wonder how. I think he's probably okay. But when your teammates just running away with it, and you're having a so-so year, it's got to be a little bit of a downer for as competitive as Scott Dixon is.
Yeah, I mean, he's had, I guess last year, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head where he finished in the championship. I think it was 5th or 6th. It was a little bit of an off year for him. He won Long Beach and he won Detroit, but then otherwise was kind of out of the picture. He had another one of these seasons kind of similar to this year, I think in 2023, where he was still looking for his first win. And then he went and won, I think, like 3 out of the last 4. He won here at Worldwide Technology Raceway, the race we're heading to this weekend. And so, I don't know that you can ever totally count Scott out. I certainly don't think, he's hit any sort of wall yet. He's talked to those of us in the media a little bit about how this heavier car doesn't quite fit his driving style as well. And so this is something he's obviously had to adapt to a whole bunch of different car configurations and new cars in general over his 20 plus year career in IndyCar. But this is something with all of this weight and how precise you have to be to take care of your tires and get the most out of a lap that just doesn't really suit the way he's gotten used to driving this car at close to, I think, 45 years old now. So I still would be surprised if at the end of the season we haven't gotten at least one win out of Scott Dixon. I know he's gotten this incredible series record that he continues to extend every single year with every single year that he tacks on with at least one win. I'd be surprised if that breaks this year, but you are right. We haven't seen nearly the there really isn't a race outside that season opener that comes to mind that he's really been in the picture down the stretch.
Mm-hmm. The other team that we're talking with Nathan Brown from the Indy Star. Another team that I think has to have some smiling going on is Meyer Shank. Both cars in the top 10, and they've had some struggles themselves. They haven't had easy years, but I'm surprised. In one sense, I'm surprised Felix isn't higher. I think Felix has had a better season than 6th place right now. Marcus has had some struggles, not necessarily of his doing. But what do you think about that? I mean, that's got to be a good for Meyer Shank. They've got to be happy to have both cars in the top 10 at this point, don't you think?
Absolutely. This is, I feel like, I don't know the exact place, but this is right around where Felix was close to this midpoint last year. And then they really struggled to even finish inside the top 10. It wasn't, I don't think, a whole lot on Felix's doing. I think there were some technical, mechanical issues where they had some failures in the car, maybe some setups that they missed on a little bit. And so he'd had such a strong start. He was, competing for poles seemingly just about every single weekend last year to start the year, and then kind of tapered off and finished right around 10th or so in points, if memory serves me right. So this is I feel like about where we saw them a year ago. And frankly, I mean, had he not been taken out of that Detroit race super late, he's actually tied for 5th in points. So had he not finished 21st, he would definitely be at least 5th. I don't know that he would have quite had enough points to catch up to 4th, but I mean, you look at Christian Lundgaard in 4th, he's only 30 points ahead or so. So a good weekend or two, he can find himself right in that top 4 if he could. He's still searching for a podium this year. He's been right around it a handful of races, so I feel like he's right there on the brink. And then Marcus Armstrong, you mentioned, honestly not had a very consistent year. I would say he's had 3 top 10s, but otherwise finishes of 24th at St. Pete, 14th at Long Beach, 17th at Barber, and then 18th in the 500. So I'm looking to see a little bit more consistency out of him, but he continues to take steps in what is still, a relatively young IndyCar career for him.
Yeah, new relationship with the team. You mentioned Ty Wood Fifth with Will Power. So the big story, I mean, I knew about this from the beginning of the season. I'm sure you guys did as well. Others did. That David Malukas is actually under a Penske contract, has been since he started with Foyt this year. I mean, that's not a shock to anybody. With the technical alliance, second year technical alliance with Foyt and Penske. But what's surprising about that is Will Power. I mean, people are actually talking about what Will Power is going to do. Is he going to be there? Is he not going to be there? He's in a contract year. This is his last year, and I think everybody has Malukas in that seat, but I don't know if Will Power is quite done yet. What do you think?
I mean, the first thing that I look at is I see where Will sits in points compared to his teammates, and I think Team Penske would be absolutely crazy to boot the driver that's first in points on Team Penske, who is the most recent driver who has won a championship for this team. The driver who, even though technically speaking, Scott McLaughlin beat him in points last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Will was the only one of them that was up until that final race when Will had his seatbelt malfunction at Nashville. He was the only driver that was, remotely in contention. He won 3 times last year. I think he had as many podiums as Alex Palou, if not more. And I think was the only driver with the number of podiums he had and 3 wins. Yes, he has not won this year, but, his teammate Scott McLaughlin has not. Joseph Newgarden, of course, has not as well. I wouldn't attribute everything that has gone wrong in any of these 3 teams to have been solely driver enforced by any stretch of the imagination. But after, outside of Will's 26th place finish in that crash at St. Pete, that seems to have been a little bit of his undoing, a really uncharacteristic mistake. He's had a run of 6 top 6 finishes, or I think 5 top 6 finishes. The 16th place at the 500 when you're starting 33rd. That was kind of a tough situation to come out of. Certainly wouldn't have finished 16th on pace had he finished, or had he started where his car was going to start on pace. After, Team Penske hadn't had its issues, and I think he's finished. Someone mentioned this stat earlier that I heard this week. He's been the top finishing Penske driver in 5 of 7 races. So. Without question, Will Power deserves to be in that seat. When we get down to contract things, they don't always pan out. Does Team Penske just offer Will a 1-year deal? Does he feel like he's continuing to perform well enough where he deserves more than that from a team that he's driven for the better part of the last 15 years? There are those types of things that I think could really factor into this decision. They've ultimately got to be on the same page, and will, whatever Penske has got to, or whatever Penske is going to be willing to offer, Will also has to accept at the same time. And I don't know that that's necessarily automatic. I will say Team Penske has a history of not waiting, let's say, too long to part ways with drivers getting close to the end of their careers. You think back to the final seasons that Helio Castroneves or Juan Pablo Montoya drove full time with these teams. Simon Pagenaud, for instance, I think even Simon had a year or 2 where he was barely finishing in the top 10 in the championship. They're not a team that is going to typically let you finish out your career no matter what. So this is going to be ultimately a business decision for both of them. I hope he stays there. I still think in the best case scenario, I think Will Power is someone that can certainly still threaten for a championship. And there were points last year, down the stretch that I really thought that he was going to have a strong chance to challenge Alex Palou, and ultimately goes out and finishes 4th. So
sure. And full disclosure, he's my favorite driver, Will Power. When I'm not rooting for Santino, who's my sentimental favorite.
Sure.
But Will's been my favorite for quite a while. Hey, well, last thing before you go. So we keep talking about this independent governance board, and I feel like in some ways it's unnecessary because it's like government. Government, one bad thing happens, so you make a law so it can never happen again, and it negatively impacts 100 million people. I feel like it's the same thing here. I mean, unless they go out and they hire USAC, just somebody completely not attached. I don't know how they can advertise this as an independent body when Penske's going to be paying the salaries. Penske Entertainment will be paying the money for it. And I don't even know if it's possible, if it's necessary. What do you think? I have mixed emotions about it. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think there are ways, the loose ways in which it has been described to me. I think there are ways where Penske Corp and Penske Entertainment can essentially set aside money. I don't know the proper business language. If the word like putting it in a trust is the right way to refer to it. But the way it's kind of been described to me is they can essentially put money themselves into some sort of separate account that they didn't, then they then don't have control over, other than, they are the ones providing the funding. And then it really depends on how the governance of all this setup. Is it something that the teams and the manufacturers essentially have votes on, who is elected to these seats? I have to think it's got to be something like, someone ultimately has to be the ones who are in charge here. And it can't be Roger Penske and Penske Corp having any sort of decision making power outside of Team Penske being involved in this, and being one of the 11 full-time teams. So the way it has been suggested most often is that it will be some sort of a newly formed independent board, with Penske essentially providing the money, but otherwise having no other connection to it. I know people will still, people who have issues with some of the things that have happened over the last couple of years, I'm sure will still question the idea of Penske funding it. But ultimately, I think there are ways where there can be funding from them, commitment to continue funding it well into the future without them having any sort of outsized decision-making power in these sides of the series, that there are some concerns about the conflict of interest at the moment.
Well, even if they brought in a fully independent, I mentioned USAC just because USAC used to be the sanctioning body, but Penske still has to pay USAC, right? Penske's paying somebody to do it. You and I could do it. He's still paying us to do it, right?
I think something like that would be more difficult because theoretically, they would have a decision on, do we want USAC to continue doing this or not? Whereas if you have this board that is voted on by the other stakeholders in the sport, the way I can kind of think about it and visualize it is that there's, not necessarily there's not I guess, for lack of a better way of describing it, a current organization that you are partnering with. So you don't have to decide, are we going to continue working with this group or not? It's just a group that gets created out of thin air solely for the purpose of governing and officiating IndyCar.
Yeah. Well, if they ask you to serve, will you serve?
I don't know that I necessarily want that role. You think about it in the NFL, in the NBA, and Major League Baseball. The only time you hear about the refs are when folks are frustrated with them. So I think I am more than happy in my reporter seat, and will continue to report on and cover how all of this comes together.
I think that's sage wisdom speaking right there. Hey, listen, happy Father's Day.
Thanks.
And I don't know, maybe I'll see you up there. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going yet. We'll see.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much. Always appreciate you. Nathan Brown, everybody, Indy Star. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Hey, we're going to take a moment here and celebrate our good friends, our partners at Speed Sport. They've got a lot going on for Father's Day week. A lot of racing happening this weekend. So let's take a look at some of the stuff from Speed Sport. We'll be back with Mike Lashmet, president of Vintage Indy.
This weekend is Father's Day, and Speed Sport 1 has the gift of speed and nostalgia. On Sunday, we'll have live action from the racing capital of the world, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's the 2025 Indy Speed Tour, featuring the Sports Car Vintage Racing Association and Formula Regional Americas. The Speed Tour Father's Day Special from Indianapolis starts at 12:30 p.m. Eastern this Sunday. Go to speedsport1.com for details and viewing options. Speed Sport 1 has a full lineup of racing this Father's Day Sunday. From rock racing to F1 boats, dirt late models to vintage sports car and formula racing at Indy, we've got dear old dad covered. It's a great day to kick back, grill a burger, maybe some pork barbecue, and enjoy great racing from coast to coast on Speed Sport 1. A Father's Day Motorsports Marathon is all day this Sunday. Visit speedsport1.com for details and viewing options.
Well, and again, we are so grateful to partner with Speed Sport. We appreciate their support and are happy to do everything we can to promote them. We are just absolutely indebted to Joe Tripp and to Ralph Shaheen. Good friends, and you love to work with people you love, right? So it works out very well for us. So I mentioned we're talking Nathan. You're not just going to have Indy cars and Indy Next cars, former Indy Lights cars, running at Worldwide Technology Raceway at Gateway this weekend. We're going to have vintage Indy, some of the most pristinely restored, beautiful, and cars from my era when I first fell in love with Indy cars as a young man. I could say a boy, I guess. And somebody who does a phenomenal job of orchestrating these things. It's like herding cats, I'm sure, sometimes. He'll be leaving, I think, early tomorrow morning for St. Louis, and they'll have these cars running, and then let's hear it from him, Mike Lashmet, the president of Vintage Indy. Mike, welcome back. How are you?
Will, good to
There
see
you
you.
are. You're looking great,
Here
Mike.
I am.
So you've got a big weekend ahead of you here, and you've got a lot of your owners coming into town with their cars. What kinds of cars? Do you know, like, who's going to be there in terms of the vintage cars? Can you share that a little bit?
Well, we've got a busy 3 weeks ahead of us. St. Louis with IndyCar this weekend,
Yeah.
followed up the next weekend, a week from this weekend at Road America with IndyCar, and then the last weekend in June, we're at the famous Milwaukee Mile with the Harry Miller Club for the annual Miller Meet. So
Yeah.
it's, full speed ahead right now, kind of
Yeah.
crazy time for us. But we got everything loaded, and we got the big hauler out earlier this afternoon. I'm home. Get to relax this evening with Dana and enjoy the evening before we have to get up and leave in the morning. But we've got quite a few cars at St. Louis, not as many as in years past. It's Father's Day weekend, SVRAs at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so everybody's trying to compete with one another. But we're going to have about 6 decades of vintage Indy cars at St. Louis, ranging from the 1930s all the way up to, I think the newest car is 1990 Mario Andretti Newman Haas Lola. So we have cars from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It's a pretty good group.
That's going to be great. And you guys are actually going to be running on the track with the vintage cars, right?
That's correct. We're going to have our new haulers set up in the fan zone, the wonderful fan zone at WWT Raceway that Curtis Francois and Chris Blair created down there a couple of years ago. And it's adjacent to the IndyCar paddock. We'll have a display of about a dozen cars in front of our hauler throughout the weekend for the fans in the fan zone. But beyond that, we're on track twice. We've got about an hour and a half worth of run time, which is really phenomenal and precious, and we're most grateful for it on an IndyCar weekend anywhere. We're on track at 8:30 Saturday morning for half an hour, 8:30 to 9 a.m. And then we're on track Sunday afternoon right before the IndyCar race. I think it's 2:30 to 3:30 for a full hour. So it should be really a great weekend.
That's got to be good. Is the STP Eagle going to be there?
The STP Eagle is on its way down there. Ted Warner will be driving it.
Oh, good. Okay.
And we're looking forward to running that car for the fans. We've also got, another popular car is the Parnelli Jones Old Calhoun, number 98 from 1963 when Parnelli won. We've got the Roger Ward Leader Card Roadster, a beautiful roadster. Bruce Lensmeyer's with us as well. Mike Lynn is bringing his 1932 B-Block Miller Ford, the Brighton Airport Special. We've got a new member, Greg Goodman from Nashville, Tennessee. He recently acquired the Newman Haas Mario Andretti 1990 Kmart Lola. So we're hoping to have that car there, and just any number of other cars. Gary Dunkel's bringing the Bobby Rahal Budweiser March. John Sweeney's bringing the John Andretti Pennzoil Lola that John won Surfers Paradise with in Australia back in 1990. Phil Gumford will be there with Dan Gurney's 1969 AAR Eagle, and just a great group of cars as always.
Wow, it's going to be so wonderful. Oh, my gosh. The thing I love about what you do, Mike, and particularly the cars, is that's the era that the early 70s, 69, 70, 71, 72. That's when I fell in love with IndyCar as a young man. And so to get the chance to see cars of that era is it's so exciting. And later, that I've seen, I watched. Your fan base it has got to be like the baby boomers and older millennial kind of folks. I think that's probably who, or maybe older Gen X. That's the folks that you really. I mean, because I go there and I'm like a kid in a candy store around those cars. I love them so much, and I know I'm not the only one. You get good crowds coming into your paddock area.
We do. We get thousands of fans through our paddock, and our paddock's free and open to the public. I like to tell fans that if you've got a ticket, if you've got a general admission ticket to an IndyCar race, whether we're at Road America or Gateway down at where we're going this weekend at WWT Raceway or at Nashville, your general admission ticket is a pit pass to the Vintage Indy paddock. Come by, see us, talk to us. The car owners are super friendly. They put a lot of the children, the young kids in the cars. What an experience for a young child to sit in Parnelli Jones's car. Yeah. I mean, it's just phenomenal. We like to say we bring the history, and we truly do. I also like to tell people, come to our paddock, come and watch the cars run, see, hear, smell, and taste history, because you're not going to see it anywhere else, really. Yeah. So they can experience that. It's a great era for all these cars. You'd be surprised. Yes, we have a lot of baby boomers that are the majority of our followers and fans, but the youth that are interested in these cars is also phenomenal. Of all the racetracks in the world, Indianapolis has the strongest following. I mean, no place has the history that Indy does, and no place has the fan appreciation for the history of Indianapolis that the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has. So the fans are interested in all eras of cars, and when they get to see these older cars, they get to hear a turbo offie, or they get to hear a Ford 4-camera light up, or the turbine car run. I mean, that's really exceptional, Will. Where else are you going to find that?
I'll never forget the first time I saw, I guess it's probably Bruce's turbine.
Bruce Lensmeyer, yes.
STP, and I'll tell you, and hearing that car, I mean, just the hearing of it is so exceptional. Seeing it is exceptional. When again, I remember as a kid, I remember that car, running a '67. Parnelli drove a turbine, and '68. Joe Leonard, right, almost won.
Well, the Bruce Lensmeyer car is the pole winner from 1968 with Joe Leonard, and he did almost win the race.
So here Andy Granatelli tried so many times. Almost won in '67 with a turbine. Almost won in '68 with another turbine. Then they outlawed the cars, I guess, right? They
finished second with Jim Clark in '66, and Andy was pretty tenacious, and he had all the backing from the STP Corporation, which was owned by Studebaker back in that era, and they pulled out all stops for their racing program to conquer Indy, and eventually he did in 1969, as we both know, with Mario Andretti.
I mean, that's a pretty good run. Almost win in '67, almost win in '68, and win in '69. I mean, that's a.
And he was only at the helm of STP for 10 years, 1963 to '73, and he brought that brand, which was an unknown product of Studebaker's, this motor oil additive, from being literally unknown to being a household name in America. And a phenomenal marketing program, a phenomenal marketer himself. He saw that avenue to market that product through motorsports, primarily IndyCar racing, and moreover the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indy 500, period. Full stop.
People have asked me who people are that I look up to in IndyCar racing, and you're one of them.
Thank you.
I tell people all the time, when I grow up, if I could have the marketing skill of Andy Granatelli and the business acumen of Roger Penske, I'd have something going on. I mean, you'd have a superhuman person there, because Andy was the king of marketers. I mean,
he was brilliant.
Jackets, the stickers, the blimps. I mean, he did everything for STP.
Not only that, but all the handouts and giveaways and the stickers alone. I mean, the stickers were all over America. They were stuck to everything. It's probably why Roger Penske and the Speedway prohibit stickers, believe it or not. Read the board when you go in the gate at Indy. But he was brilliant in that respect. He had a team of jobbers that drove these station wagons that were all STP logoed up, and they went out and they called on local gas stations, auto parts businesses, dealerships, and everything to sell that product. And they always had these freebies with them, these handouts, the swag as we call it today. Everything from pocket protectors to stickers to ballpoint pens to calendars to you name it. And I was a kid, teenager back then, and a friend of mine owned a local Standard Oil station, and the jobber would come through there, and Mr. Jennings would always save that stuff for me. He knew that I was like over the top, in love with IndyCar. So he'd always save the majority of that stuff for me and give it to me.
So you mentioned when he left STP, 1973, difficult year, but Gordon Johncock won that race, rain shortened, in an STP car. So was Andy part of that effort as well?
Well, that was a two-pronged effort that year. The Granatelli brothers entered a brand new Eagle with Graham McRae with a turbo offie. And then the other two STP cars were with the team that I was with, which was STP Patrick Racing, Gordon Johncock and the late Swede Savage. Of course, Gordy won. Swede ended up succumbing to injuries that he suffered in that race. And I forget where Gordon McRae ended up. It was, it was the only Indy 500 I think that he ever ran. But the Granatelli brothers took care of the Graham McRae car. He was, where was he from? New Zealand or Australia? I always get mixed up.
He was a Formula 5000 driver, wasn't he?
Correct. Yes, he was very strong in 5000, the Tasman series. He built a car over in England, actually in the same building that later on in Poole, England, that same building that Roger Penske later occupied and built all the Penske cars in.
Wow.
It was called a Talon. The car that McRae built was called a Talon. It was an F5000 car. There's the car that Chris Amon drove. Chris Amon drove one of those cars, and the car that Chris Amon drove is down in the Ray Skillman collection in Greenwood, Indiana.
So how many teams did you work for? I mean, you started as a young man, right? I mean, when you worked for Pat Patrick, you worked for George Bignotti. Who else did you work for?
Well, I started out with Bignotti at Vels Parnelli Jones, and then George left. I stayed. In between going back to work for him at Patrick, once he told me he was able to hire some people, I did a short stint with Dick Simon on the Travelodge Eagle, the beginning of '73. But we were on the grid at, I forget what race it was at, and we were ready to start the race, and George walked up to me and he said, "Hey, would you like to go back to work for me?" And I said, "Sure, when?" And he goes, when and when can I start? And he goes, "How about tomorrow morning?"
Oh.
It was a Sunday, and so I said, "Okay." So the next thing I know, I'm back working for Bignotti at Patrick Racing. But eventually I got out, after Patrick, a few years at Patrick, I got out, and then my life took another career path. But I was a weekend warrior with Clint Bronner on Al Acosta's cars, and I helped Foyt on Snyder's cars, and I don't know, just any number of different people like that over the years.
I don't know if this is accurate, but maybe you would know. I think Dick Simon holds the record for being the oldest driver to actually compete in the 500. Do you know?
He did at one time, and I assume he probably still does. Yeah.
I think he was like 56. I mean, it was not a
Yeah,
young,
he was a rookie in what year was he a rookie? 71, I think he was a rookie. He actually didn't qualify. His team car, which was a Volstead, and John Mailer was driving it. John qualified, and then there was this big stink over Simon, wanted to run the car instead of Mailer, which they allowed, but then you had to go and start 33rd. But Mailer abandoned the seat, probably made some money, and we'd have to ask John. He's still living over in Bettendorf, Iowa, I believe. We could find out. But Simon ended up driving the car in the race, and then in '72 he came back with a Lola copy, and it was sponsored by Travelodge. And then going into '73, he got a brand new Dan Gurney Eagle, and it was the only Eagle that was built in Santa Ana by AAR that had a turbo Ford. It was purpose built for a turbo Ford 4-camera engine, because Dick had a lot of those motors, because he had run those in 71, 72.
Sure. I mean,
but he was low budget. I mean, sponsored by Travelodge, struggled, but it was an interesting time, that the few months that I spent there with him. He's a great guy. And Bobby Hatch.
He's still alive, right?
He is, yeah. Bobby Hatch was on that team with me. It was very small. Hal Spurb and Steve Biljanic, and that was it. Period. We had one car, and we had a brand new Gerhardt box truck hauler, and Foyt. The motor, Keith Randall did the motors. They were all Foyt 4-cammers, and we went through a lot of motors. I mean, everybody was going through a lot of motors back then, both turbo Fords and offies. There were no pop-off valves then. The boost was unrestricted, so depending on how brave you were and how much money you had, you could screw as much boost into one of those cars as you wanted. So
Yeah, the pop-off valve was a broken cylinder coming out of
Yeah.
the floor.
Well, I mean, that was the pop-off valve. It's an interesting story in itself because, the pop-off valve, USAC brought it around and brought it into the rule book to kind of, number one, slow the cars down and help the lower budget teams. So, if you, with the pop-off valve, you can only put so much boost in there and it's going to bleed the excess off. So the idea was, the high dollar teams, they're not going to be able to put all this boost in here. And, when they put the boost in there, if they've got a big budget, I mean, they can afford to maybe lose a motor.
Sure.
And if they've got a driver like an Al Unser Sr. or Mario Andretti or Bobby Unser, they know those guys are going to gas it. So, the combination of those two things really put the low budget guys, the John Martins, the Dick Simons, and others kind of behind the 8-ball. So USAC in their infinite wisdom decided to come up with a pop-off valve, and people hated it in the beginning, and people tried to bypass it and cheat. And, they used everything from dimes to washers to try to jam the things open to not work and whatnot. And it was an interesting period, but that stayed with us,
I think I can just imagine in the early days of the pop-off valve, people were probably putting steel plates under them and stuff trying to cut.
No, there was all kinds of I called it C&D, chicanery and deceit. trying to cheat. Basically, I'm not going to tell you who the big cheaters were, but there were quite a few. I mean, everybody tried to do something, and usually you got busted. USAC controlled the pop-off valves. They issued them to you. You turned them in after the race, and it was like, being in a numbers basket where they crank it and pick a different number every time. So every time you got a different pop-off valve, and you never knew which one you were going to get. They tried to keep the playing ground, as reasonably even as they could. I think it was a good idea at the time because we were losing a lot of motors back then from, excess boost. And I mean, people burning pistons left and right. And, some guys like John Martin, they only had one motor. I mean,
Right.
So he did all the engine work himself, and it was really hard. It was hard for those guys to try to compete.
Well, it was kind of too, wasn't it? Almost a transition of era at that point where the cars are getting more technically advanced, more horsepower, and we still, guys were still showing up on cars with flatbeds. I mean, it was a different.
Yeah, I mean, Vels Parnelli Jones had the first 18-wheeler hauler as we know him today, and it was built by Don Gerhardt's outfit up in Fresno, and beautiful truck, had a machine shop in it, held 3 cars and just everything you could imagine. But, then you had A.J. Watson. He was still going down the road with, small Chevy pickup with a camper shell on it, pulling an open wheel Watson trailer with a brand new Eagle on it. And they would put the Eagle on backwards. They'd have to leave the nose off the car, load the car, strap it down, and then fold up the ramps. And then put the nose back on. So the nose stuck out behind the trailer, on this Eagle, I don't know, 3 feet maybe, and you're in traffic going across country to California or Phoenix or Trenton or wherever. So yeah, there was a lot of diversity in budget back then. It wasn't like every team today's got an 18-wheeler and all this other stuff, it just wasn't that way. So, but it was a very interesting period.
Because of your experience and times that you've been around IndyCar, I want to ask you a question. A lot of talk now about this independent governance board that is supposed to be up and running for the 2026 season. No clear affiliation to Penske Entertainment, although Penske will be paying the bill for it. I'm questioning if it's, number one, if it's even needed. And then number two, why not just take somebody that's already established and has done it before, and I'm thinking of USAC, why not just hire somebody to do it instead of creating?
Yeah, you raise a good point. I mean, I would kind of somewhat agree with you. I question as to whether it's truly needed or not, or they just don't need to, maybe clean house, rethink, refine, bring in the right people. The cars today electronically are complicated, to say the least. I mean, who are you going to bring in to sanction this? A bunch of guys from MIT. I mean, people have to have knowledge of Indy cars, number one, meaning you got to be a former mechanic or, somebody of that nature. I mean, you have to have the intimate knowledge of all this stuff.
Sure.
If you look at a wire loom on a modern day Indy car, it's almost mind-boggling. I mean, you know, where do you start?
Right.
You know, all of this brouhaha around the Indy 500 and the attenuator and that whole thing, it's like, I don't know, it's a tempest in a teapot, in my opinion. I don't
I
know if
agree.
there was any advantage to that little piece, and they made a major brouhaha over it, and I don't think it's good for the sport. It makes everybody look like they don't know what the heck's going on, and I love IndyCar racing. I think what IndyCar racing needs, it needs fair officiating, which I'm not saying it doesn't have that, but they also need more power. In my opinion, the cars need more horsepower. They're so aero dependent right now. I mean, the 500 this year, I love the Indy 500, but we're 15 laps from the checker and we got 4 cars virtually nose to tail, and it appeared almost, I'm not driving these things, but it's almost like none of them had the power to pass one another. They couldn't pass one another. They didn't. So what's that tell you? And the cars are just super aero dependent, and I think if there was more horsepower and these guys maybe had to lift just a millisecond and 1 and 3, and I don't know, I think it would make it a lot more interesting for the fans. I think they certainly need to think about those sorts of things. I mean, I love this sport passionately, you know that. I don't want to see anything happen to it that's to its detriment. But on the other hand, it's an entertainment product. It always was. It always will be. And you got to keep it entertaining. And people come to see a race. They don't come to see follow the leader and no passing and, races won and lost on pit stop strategy. Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, that's part of the game too.
Sure.
When that ends up being the only way that cars, change positions on track, it's kind of, in my opinion, not appealing.
I agree. I mean, I've been saying this about the 500. From a purely technical standpoint, it wasn't a very good race because of so many crazy things happening. But from a fan standpoint, it was a fairly exciting 500. Some things happened. Nobody got really hurt, which was good.
It was, my wife and I, after the race, it was kind of, I don't know, we were kind of scratching our head and what just happened, you know?
Yeah.
We waited. There was just this few drops of rain and that held up the start. And then all of a sudden it starts, the first 11 laps run under yellow and they're at lap 12 before they get a, full green. And then you got this weird, Scotty McLaughlin incident. And then Marco Andretti goes in the wall and so forth and so on. And it's like, I'm thinking, oh boy, this is, where are we going with this? But I love the 500.
Yeah.
I praised IndyCar, Roger Penske. I got to give everybody high marks. Doug Bowles, the Speedways. It looks fabulous. Not that it didn't under the Holman George tenure, but everything is just, it's just first class. They've got this product nailed down. It's just, how are we going to make these cars more competitive and put on a better show? Not that they put on a bad show now. It's hit or miss. You go to one race during the season and it's an incredible race, incredible finish and lots of passing and whatnot. And then you go to another race and it's like a nothing burger, I say. So, we need to dial it in. I think somehow I'm not a genius about this and I'm certainly not running an IndyCar team, but I talk to a lot of people and have a lot of friends in the sport and around the sport, and, people feel the same way that I do,
Yeah. No, I think that's universally true. And I want to ask you one more thing, Mike, while we've got some time, because the family, the person. I couldn't believe I got a hold of an old article actually published recently by our good friends at Haggerty. And it was an article written by Dan Gurney. And Dan said that he believed that the addition of wings was ruining the sport. That it was taking the skill of the driver out of the equation to some degree, and that with the added downforce of the wings, he felt it was making the cars easier to drive. Have you ever seen that article? Did you ever talk to Dan about it?
I've seen it. We've talked about it.
Yeah.
We're talking about 50 years ago.
Yes,
over 50 years ago.
First time I ever saw it. I never saw it before.
Wings first became a thing in IndyCar racing. They were prohibited basically by USAC. And in 71, McLaren showed up with an M16 with, Peter Revson driving it and Denny Hulme. And they had kind of found a flaw in the USAC rule book, whereas they had a rear wing on that M16 and they had front wings, but they were incorporated into the bodywork, and that's where they beat the rule book.
Right.
It's like we won the 500 that year with Al Unser in the Johnny Lightning Special, the #1 Johnny Lightning Special. And Al Sr., for years after the race, he always said to me, "Mike, we won the race." He said, "but Revson had the car." And I go, "Well, then how come we won the race?" And he goes, "Because I had the experience." But that was the beginning of the wings. So the following year, 72, USAC allowed wings. I mean, they just changed the rule book. You didn't have to run an engine cover anymore. The rear wing didn't have to incorporate it into the bodywork. You didn't have to run a tail section on the car. Everything changed. And now you've got the M16 McLaren, which now they've improved in 1 year. And then Roman Slobodinsky designs the 7200 series for Dan Gurney, and we're off and running. And Bobby Unser gets the pole at Indianapolis in 72 and eclipses Peter Revson's previous year pole winning speed by 18 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You're never going to see that again.
Yeah.
This is because of Advance's entire technology in 1 year, but moreover, it's the wings. And the cars we were running.
Do you think Dan was right, Mike?
I think he was. I think he was. And Dan Gurney drove cars with wings. I mean, he drove Can-Am McLarens, and, he invented the Gurney flap. And, of course, his car won the 75 500 with Bobby Unser. And, of course, it had wings on it and so forth and so on. But, I think Dan, he knew something that other people weren't realizing. And did it make it easier to drive a car? I don't know. There used to be a saying, it made a lot of race car drivers a lot braver.
Yeah.
It gave them false courage, and it made the car stick better. I mean, it's not so hard to make a car go fast in a straight line, but to make a car handle and corner and go through a corner fast, that's the tricky part. In fact, that's the real tough part. And with wings, that changed that tremendously, because, the beginning of the aero devices or wings on Indy cars, nobody really knew what the heck they were doing. I mean, honestly, they barely knew how to build a proper wing. And then once they did, I remember tire testing in March at Indianapolis in 72 with Al Sr. And we had the new Parnelli, and of course it had all these aero devices on it. And Maurice Felipe was there, and they strapped this great big aluminum box on the left side of the car, and it had some kind of computer data collection system in it. And it was like, for us mechanics, this was like going to Mars. And, Al would go out and he'd run 2 laps. He'd come in pushing. His response was push. We'd make some changes. He'd go back out loose. Well, just chased it, loose, push, loose, which is not uncommon. Right. But in that era, they really didn't know how to dial these things in with the wings. I mean, it was all, you talk about spring rates had to change, the dampers they call them today, but shock absorber technology, everything had to change to accept that downforce. You had to run different, obviously heavier springs. I mean, just everything changed. So Gurney was on to something, but here we are 50 years later, and we got wings. They're not as big as they were in my day, but
right.
The wings in 72 could be 64 inches wide on the rear or to the center line of the rear tire. They were massive. They were as big as a door on your house, and immense downforce. And then after the 73 race and everything that transpired that month, the loss of Art Pollard and Race Day Sweet Savage and whatnot, they cut the wings down before we went to Milwaukee right after Indy. I think we had to go down from 64 inches center line or rear tire to 54 inches wide. And then over the season going into 74, they changed the rule once again and went all the way down to 48 inches maximum width. So they were trying to diminish some of that downforce, slow these cars down. Because, I think they were concerned about people, getting hurt, and drivers were getting hurt, and drivers were getting killed, actually.
It seemed like back then almost once a year we'd lose somebody in practice or qualifying.
Yeah, it was not uncommon, and it's like, it's always a weird day when that happens. And, the first time it happens and you experience it, it's surreal. And I can tell you, and, it never really gets any better beyond that. I mean, it's tragic, but it's improved greatly. I mean, the safety of the Indy cars today is phenomenal. I mean, these guys survive things today that would have been unthinkable, 50 years ago.
Sure. Well, we are out of time, my friend. As always, it is always good to catch up with you.
Always good to see you. I hope to see you in St. Louis Saturday.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We're still trying to negotiate that. So We'll see if we can get out there.
Life
Mike,
is a
thank you so-
negotiation.
Hey,
Bill.
people want to find out more about Vintage Indy. What's the best way? The website? Where should we go?
Oh, I love our Instagram page because we get so many followers.
Okay.
I put up a video of Mario shaking down Parnelli Jones's winning car to run on race day morning at Indy. The day they shook him down, we're way over 20,000 hits on that little video.
Oh, wow.
It's
Good.
just phenomenal. So I tell people, go to our Instagram page. I think you'll learn more on there than anywhere. Yes, we do have a website, vintageindyregistry.com. It's interesting, but I think I try to post daily on Instagram and share it to Facebook. So
And what's the Instagram handles? Is it just Vintage Indy?
Vintage Indy,
That's it. Okay.
pretty simple. Facebook
Mike-
as well.
Get some rest. Be
Thank
safe
you.
in your travels, and I hope I see you over the weekend.
Okay, thanks, Will.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate
All right,
you so
bye.
much. All right. Guys, that's it. That's a wrap. Alex, great show today. Nathan Brown, Indy Star, great show. Listen, this show's just getting better and better. Every week I feel like we are. I feel like we're gaining our sea legs every week. The show's just getting better and better. And who knows? Maybe we might be on the verge of an expansion. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. Whatever platform you're on, please like, comment, share. And again, I put this. Oh, go to our website, thepitseropen.com. Sign up for our newsletter. You'll love it. It's a great newsletter. Once a week it comes out. And then if you're on YouTube, please go to the new YouTube page, the Pits Are Open podcast. You'll know it's the right page if you see the green light with the Pits Are Open. Pits are open here most of the time. Right now, the pits are closed. We're going to go. See you later. Hope they have a great race at St. Louis. God bless you guys. We love you. See you later.